Hopefully.
Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower. Welcome back to the Gospel Truth channel. And today I'm very excited to have with me Avery from The Lois Show. And if you don't know who Avery is from The Lois Show, let me tell you a little bit about The Lois Show. The channel covers the Planet X system, Nibiru, safety tips and issues, current events, weather patterns, earth changes, conspiracy facts, and having faith. And I was having a little talk with Avery before we went on air, and she has a lot of things that she's interested in. Avery, before we get started, just tell us a little bit about you and tell us how people can get in touch with you if they want to find out more about your information, because I have a feeling they are really going to want to do so.
Well, I started the Lois Show to try and showcase and promote a safety software that I invented and am in the process of launching the app on. And people can go to the Lois Show on YouTube. You can also go to safelois.com if you want to actually try the web app version of the product. I started the channel with sort of doing safety tips and things like that. And then I kind of moved more into deeper topics that were really more important to me. And things that I think maybe a couple of years ago I wouldn't have been brave enough to talk about are things that I'm talking about on my channel, and it's really resonating. So that's kind of me and what I'm doing right now.
You know, one of your passions has to do with not only protecting, yourself and helping people protect themselves as well, but you've got a real passion along the child sex trafficking and abuse, correct?
Yes, I started researching human trafficking after a friend of mine who's also in the software arena on the Space Coast. I live on the Space Coast of Florida near NASA. And she is working on a technology to help law enforcement more quickly track down sex traffickers. And when I met her and found out about what she was doing and read about all her statistics, I was just floored. And, the biggest statistic I think people have to think about is 800,000 to 1 million children are going missing in this country alone. And when you start reading the statistics, you just start thinking that, no, there's something wrong. There's something wrong here. This is more than just the random missing child. There's a much bigger picture. And I started researching it. And then about 2 years after that, the whole Pizzagate thing broke, and I delved into that a lot further. A lot of other people did as well. It became sort of this movement. It still is. And I think that it's starting to come to the forefront, which is really what we need to do to stop this.
Interesting. Now, Avery, I'm over in the Tampa Bay area, so we're not too far away from one another. And coincidentally, synchronistically, I was having lunch with a couple of folks this weekend, and the lady I was there with, she also is getting very involved in helping children. And there's some type of an organization, I forget the name, where they actually will go in and help rescue children. And I was very, very shocked to learn, I was born and raised as a Floridian, and tell me if you think this is correct. I was told that Florida is probably the #1 state for child trafficking. That blows my mind. I would think Nevada, I'd think California.
No, it's because of the ports. It's because of the easy accessibility from all sides of the peninsula. And I was shocked to find out about that too. In fact, Orlando was the epicenter. And what happened was when they started cracking down on them in Orlando, they moved to my county, actually, Brevard County, because we have the port here, Port Canaveral.
And you're just maybe an hour drive away from Orlando.
Exactly. So they all moved here. That movie Taken was actually based on a girl that lived here. And they found her at a port in New York. Now, she was, I think, about 15 years old. And when you're talking about child sex trafficking, we're talking about children as young as infants. But yeah, it's in every community. And I think that's what's going to shock people, is when they realize the depth of what's going on and that it's in your community.
Avery, you're telling me that the movie Taken with Liam Neeson was based on a real story.
That's what I was told by my IP attorney, who actually knows the man whose daughter was taken. Now, luckily, they found her at a port in New York City. Had she gone on that ship, they probably never would have seen her again. But yes, that's what he told me.
It's fascinating. So, you watch these things and, it's an action movie and it's exciting, but to think and to know that it's actually real,
Right.
wow, that's very, very sobering. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, or again, synchronistically, how things work out, you yourself have been a victim of violent acts, correct?
I was a near victim twice. I'm also a realtor in Florida, and I had my own real estate company. I'm a real estate broker, and I was showing a house to a man, and he became very agitated and was acting very strangely, and was trying to back me into corners, and obviously trying to get me to go upstairs. And I just, the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I knew
Right.
something was wrong. And luckily I had street smarts. I grew up outside of Detroit. My parents were very overprotective. So I had the sort of my guard up, and I was able to get out of that situation. A month later, I was in a situation where I was drugged, and I was close to being raped by 4 men. This was in Orlando. And so after those two situations happened to me personally, I looked for a technology solution that would track me, and it didn't exist the way I wanted it to exist. So I created it. And
Now, was that second scenario, if this isn't too personal, was that like a date rape scenario?
that was actually somebody I knew from back home where I was from. I was raised in Michigan, and the other 3 men I didn't know, and he was visiting from out of town. So it was one of those, hey, come over for a beer. I want you to meet some of my friends. I thought it was totally harmless. I did a video on that on my channel on my experience, and I've done a couple videos on date rape drugs. If anyone wants to know more information about how to protect themselves, I do have that information.
Excellent. Let's take a quick look at your channel so everybody can see it. This is the about. I was actually looking at that to read what you have on it. But to look at the home part of the channel, it's actually a very attractive channel. I like the way that you do your channel.
Oh, thanks.
And this is it. The truth will set you free. And the videos are very interesting. Hopefully we can talk about a little of this. I mean, you've got everything from Nibiru to chemtrails to UFOs. You
Yeah.
got conspiracy fact or fictions, what to do if there's no doctor. And I assume as we get further back into some of your earlier videos, that's where we're going to see more about, like this one, how to prepare for a hurricane, how to handle rejection, stop realtor crime. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Should you quit your job? What's that all about, Avery? Should you quit your job?
That one was when I was grappling between my real estate career and being the owner of a software company. And part of what I started doing on my channel were business tips, motivational tips, things that I was going through. It was kind of cathartic for me to sort of work that through on the channel. So there's a lot of that in the beginning. Now I'm getting into topics that are more conspiratorial, quote unquote, and that I'm more passionate about, because that's what draws people to the content, is when you're really passionate about it.
Absolutely. And I think you make such a good point about, quitting your job, because I was at that point about a year ago with this work that I'm doing. And it's very, very hard to take that plunge and decide, you know what, I'm going to follow my passion. I was selling real estate too,
Oh,
uh,
wow.
a week at a time for Marriott. I was in
Oh,
timeshare.
nice.
So I was, and we did have to have a real estate license for what it's worth. But you get to that point where you're like, wow, I can keep doing this and keep my lifestyle the way it is. Me, I made the decision to go cold turkey and hardcore, and, you know, uh, emptied my life of almost everything and built it back up. But it is very freeing when you can get to the place where you can do your passion, and especially with you
Mhm.
having such a passion for doing something that's so practical and so helpful for people. And I'm just thinking about dating. You know,
Mhm.
it's one thing if you're a guy. I mean, guys, physically, strength, we can, most of the time take care of ourselves. We can talk about that later. But I'm thinking about a woman. I have 2 daughters, and
Mhm.
going out on a date really can be a very potentially hazardous situation for you.
It is. And I did videos on that. I actually did a couple where I interviewed some people who were on websites or apps like Tinder. And you are absolutely exposing yourself. So there are things that you have to be aware of, that yes, you could be drugged, that this person, if they pick you up from home, they're going to know where you live. So if they turn out to be a psycho, now they know where you live. So people on the dating scene, people who get into an Uber, I did a live Uber ride where I showed, how Lois can help you track you through an Uber ride.
No kidding.
Yeah. And it was funny. Our Uber driver was actually a really good sport on that. But there's perils everywhere for females, but also for men. When I started doing crime statistic research, I was surprised that 33% of the men who are assaulted in the real estate community, or 33% of the people assaulted in the real estate community were men. And men are assaulted. Men are not protected completely from that. So I think everybody needs a little extra level of protection.
When you think about a real estate scenario, usually you're meeting someone at a vacant house. It's you, the realtor, and the person that you're showing the house to, or maybe, a couple or, 3 or 4 people, and you're inside an empty house. And if the door gets locked behind you, you are very, very vulnerable to being taken advantage of. And I've read about agents being, assaulted before, and it is a very, very real problem. And the dating scene, again, as I think through it, I can see where that could be an issue. I mean, even for a man, you can be drugged, you can have, something, stuck real quick with a needle, you could be whatever, you can be jumped. But let's talk, if we can, about the child trafficking, because they're the most vulnerable. They can't really take care of themselves. They don't have the strength. They sometimes don't have the wiles about them. They haven't lived that long. Right. Tell us a little bit, frame us, if you can, frame for us the problem and let us know kind of the breadth of it and what we're up against. And then maybe we can transition into some ways that we can all help. My kids are grown and gone, but I'm sure there's still ways that I'm able to help and our audience is able to help as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's a huge topic and it's multifaceted.
Sure.
The one thing I want to get across to people is that this is a global problem. This is worldwide. It's in virtually every community on the planet. And it's a very intricate, well-run system. This is run by cabals, the bad guys of the planet. And it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. I think human trafficking has reached almost $1 trillion industry.
Talk about that, Lois. Lois? See, I knew I was going to do it. Avery, I'm sorry. Talk about that, Avery. Where is the money being made? Why is it a $1 trillion, multi-billion-dollar business?
Because there's a market for these children, and there's a market on many different levels. Now, you can take it to the highest level, which is satanic ritual abuse. I mean, we could go right to, there are Luciferians on the planet. There are Satanists on the planet. Some of them are in control of governments and are in the FBI and are in the church, as you're aware of. And their religion says that human sacrifice and blood sacrifice, and specifically the sacrifice of children, is what gives them their power. That's what they're taught. And so there is a huge, huge volume of people on the planet who are in these covens and in these cabals who need a constant supply of children for these blood sacrifices. That doesn't even get into the pedophilia part of it. That's just literally sacrificing children, and also cannibalism is practiced as well. And this is well documented. There's testimony from survivors, there's whistleblowers. Ted Gunderson was one of the top FBI whistleblowers. You can look up all kinds of stuff on him. A lot of people think he was murdered over all of this. But to me, that's the part that people don't get. It's not just the random creepy guy at the end of the street who likes to touch kids, or the random, they were running a child trafficking ring with teenage girls, is what a lot of people think.
Right.
They don't get this satanic part of it. And if you don't wrap your head around that part of it, you're not going to be able to get the answer to that question of, why is there so much money in it? Why is this supply so integral to these people?
So Avery, you're telling us that as much as we hate to believe it, as much as we like to think it's a conspiracy theory, as much as we like to think that, this is just in the movies, this is just in, the dark web, this isn't real stuff. You're telling me that through your research and through your just time in this, you are convinced, you've seen hard evidence that there really is a large role that satanic Luciferian worship plays in the disappearance of millions of children worldwide every year.
Absolutely. And it's been covered up for thousands of years. I mean, it's been going on for thousands of years, and certainly in our lifetimes, it's been covered up. And people have been murdered over trying to bring it to the forefront.
That's staggering. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower. We're talking with Avery from the Lois Show, and we're discussing child trafficking. We're going to talk a little bit about personal safety and protection, and maybe move on to some other things. Avery is an expert in these areas. And again, Avery, it just staggers my mind to come back. You know, I was 20 years a preacher. You know, I've been involved in the paranormal realm now for, you know, almost 15 years. So I really, and I see it, I live it, I talk to people every day, but I don't know if it's just me in my mind. I kind of want to poo-poo that. I kind of want to put it on the back burner. I want to assign it to the, you know, the lunatic fringe, but you're telling me it's real.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a human, if you're not a sociopath, it's a natural human reaction to not want to believe it. And that is one of the key reasons why they've been getting away with it, because people don't believe it's real. Even the children, there's so many cases where children have come forward and said, I was forced to kill babies. I was forced to have sex. With people in churches. And it's dismissed, it's covered up. It's, the children are lying. Children don't make those types of stories up. They don't say they were forced to kill infants on camera. So I made about a 30-minute mini documentary on this. And I have to say it was one of the worst experiences because I had to go to so many dark places.
Is it on your channel, Avery?
Yes, it's, I think I pinned it to the top of the channel
Okay. And by the way, hello to Dan from Overwatch channel. I think he'll be very interested in your work, and Dan Avery might be a great guest for you as well. Please continue, Avery.
So where were we? I forgot what I was.
You were talking about how it's much easier for us to ignore it, and that children don't really make up these types of stories.
Yeah, and now you have people who are survivors of satanic ritual abuse, and there's thousands of them, and they've come forward, and there's testimony. There's covered up FBI reports. There's people who have been murdered when you start piecing it all together, you realize this is huge. And the Pizzagate scandal was a good thing in one hand because it actually broke this story through to the mainstream media in a way that was never done before. But it also did a disservice because it made it into a fringe, this is a crazy conspiracy theory.
Right.
And so the Pizzagate theory is that there's a pizza place in DC called Comet Ping Pong, owned by James Alefantis, who is one of the 50 most interesting people in Washington, DC, supposedly. And that they were running a worldwide child sex ring out of the basement of this place. And someone went into the place and shot at whatever, the walls. No one was hurt because he wanted to free the children. And that was the false flag narrative that was running on the mainstream media. In my opinion, that was a false flag.
Absolutely. I agree 100%.
So they trivialized it and they turned it into, well, of course, no one's going to believe that there's a worldwide child trafficking ring running through a Comet Ping Pong's basement, because there isn't.
And Avery, we know that the FBI would never cover anything up. The FBI is as pure as the driven snow. And wait a minute, there's a memo coming across my desk. Apparently not. The FBI does cover things up. And can we say something right from the beginning, that as much as I'd like to get on here and say this is a Democratic National Convention problem, this is a Democratic politician problem, that would be very, very myopic of me to say that, wouldn't it? Say it's just limited to the Democrats.
Well, that's another diversionary tactic. So not only do you have the natural instinct of human beings to not want to think that this level of evil is possible, but then you have the diversionary tactics of being able to say, oh, this was just the alt-right trying to do something to win, get Donald Trump to win. It's about children. It's not about any of that. It's about children. They're going missing. They're being tortured. They're being sold. They're being raped. They're being murdered. 1 million children in this country alone. Where are they?
1 million over how long of a time, Avery?
Pardon me?
1 million per year?
On average, reported, yes.
And that doesn't even include the people that are probably like I was talking to George Nora, and he's talking about people disappearing from the national parks. Those probably aren't even filtered in, are they? Figured in.
And the rest of the world is not. I mean, look at what happened in Haiti, and those aren't figured in. Look at what probably is happening right now in Puerto Rico. I know
1 million children a year,
and they just are gone. So
just poof, they're gone.
They're gone. They're gone.
What usually happens, Avery?
What my research has shown me is
can you take us through the process? This is what happens, then this.
Well, some of the children are sold in by their families. Some of them are homeless children who are very susceptible. Some of them are born into satanic bloodlines. So they're part of this as well. That's my understanding of how they get the children. And then they just, take them too. They just will kidnap children as well. And my understanding is that it goes through intricate networks. There's underground facilities throughout the entire world. Look into the Getty, what's under the Getty. A lot of people are saying that there's tons of children being held under there. And that's how they move these children. They have deals with airlines. They have deals with ships. So, they're paying people off. And you're also getting into, when you're getting into the high ranking officials who are doing this, you have a lot of blackmail going on. You have the Satanism that's being practiced, and then you have blackmail where, maybe they'll get you in there at a party, they'll drug you, they'll put you in bed with a child, boom, now you're their slave. Or they'll just threaten you. We'll kill you, we'll kill your husband, we'll kill your wife, we'll kill your children. I mean, the system of control is built on fear. So that is from what I understand, and I am by no means an expert because there's so much material that it would take me years to go through all of it. But from what I've learned, that's kind of how it operates.
Now, somebody's asking in the chat room, Wendy asks, do you think that sometimes the need for like organ transplants and things like that can figure in the elites trying to get organs on the black market?
I know for sure that that's part of the human trafficking problem. Absolutely. Body parts. And we could get to we could even talk to the off-planet presence, that could potentially be interested in human beings and harvesting and all that stuff, but not going there, just keeping it on this planet for now. Yeah, absolutely. Organ, body parts. Like I said, there's cannibalism involved. If you know anything about Satanism, I mean, the most, I think it's the most pure thing on the planet is the blood of like a newborn male child. That has the adrenochrome in it. And so your supply, there's a supply there. I mean, there's a supply because there's a demand. So the demand is the sickness of society. It's the Satanists, it's the pedophiles, it's the people that were raped and tortured as children who turned into pedophiles and turned into the perpetrators. It's a multi-generational sickness. And if people don't understand that component of it, I don't think that we can stop it.
So we really need to sit back and realize how huge this is. I mean, there's the Luciferian aspect of it, the organ aspect of it. And there's just as well, unfortunately, I would imagine there's just a huge sexual sadism type of a market as well.
There absolutely is. And there are people who do utilize the dark web to advertise the torture of children. You can actually go on the dark web and pay to watch a child being tortured. You can pay to watch a woman being tortured, a man. You can pay money to tell the torturer what to do to them. I mean, And if people say things like, well, this is just on the dark web, well, the dark web is a mirror of the sickest part of society. So it's not just one person doing it on the dark web. If that's going on, it's going on, like where there's smoke, there's fire. It's going on, and it's more pervasive than people would ever imagine. And it's horrific. And I don't recommend that people ever go to the dark web or ever research it, because there's things that you just cannot unknow and unsee. But it is pervasive, more than anyone could ever fathom. And like I said, it was very difficult for me to do that documentary, because the subject matter is it's so disturbing.
Oh, it really is. And, people try to, oh, it's just the dark web. But if you think about the dark web and think about the traffic that's on the dark web, the numbers of users on the dark web, it numbers very, very conservatively in the millions, and very well could be up into the billions. So there's a lot of people that are on the dark web, and there's a lot of nefarious practices going on the dark web. So
absolutely.
How much is it, how much do you think people have to worry about, taking little Johnny or little Susie to the park or to the, Disney World or something like that? Are they grabbing kids from
yes.
the family next door? Is that an issue as well?
Disney World is a horrible place. If you've done any research on Walt Disney and the occult, Disney World's an awful place.
Avery, it's not the happiest place on earth.
It's definitely not. There are supposedly tunnels under Disney World as well. I think that's a huge place where they would take kids. If I were a parent, I would be extremely vigilant. And that's the thing that I think people have to understand as well, is a lot of people are in their bubble, they're in their town or their city, and they just can't think that this is going on. And an example of this is where I grew up in outside of Detroit in Southeast Michigan. There was a school, it was a private school called the Roper School. And I follow a woman on Twitter, her name's Sarah Ashcroft, and she is a whistleblower, very courageous woman who has come out and talked about her own satanic ritual abuse.
Sarah Ashcroft?
Sarah Ashcroft, I believe, is her name. And I think it's HIVITES is the sect that this Luciferian religion comes from, that she was involved in.
Okay. Send me her thing on Twitter if you get a chance. I noticed that we connected on Twitter.
Oh, I will. I definitely will. And she recently through chatting with her on Twitter, I found out that she went to this Roper School. She grew up right where I grew up.
Wow.
And I was just floored. But then I think back to my childhood, and we had, the Oakland County child killer. And I mean, so I lived in a bigger metropolis, but it's happening in every community. From my understanding, it is, and in other communities, it could be that just that incestual pedophilia that goes through the generations, because that happens too, not necessarily tied to Satanism, but it's a learned behavior. And there's people who just are pedophiles who have an appetite for children as well. So
true. Now, I was born and raised in Florida, and I never had much use for Disney World. I went a couple of times. If I never go again, it'll be too soon. Right. But my son and his wife actually went and applied for jobs at Disney World because they live in Orlando. I was living in Orlando at the time. And Avery, he told me that when you walk into the place to apply for your job at Disney World, it's like walking into this crazy, weird pagan temple. You walk up this ramp, and there's, it's like a circular area, and you've got all the gods there, all of the characters. And he said it was just like a esoteric, cultic experience. And I decided he's got to be crazy. So I applied for a job at Disney myself just to go in there. And Avery, I got to tell you, that was one of the craziest, weirdest experiences of my entire life. It really is. It's like you're walking into a cult. It's like you're joining a sect. They call you a cast member if you get hired. It really is a dark and a troubling place. I know there's probably a lot of people in the chat room that love Disney World, and they've got, they've got annual passes, but folks, rethink that money that you're spending. You might want to distribute that to some other places, because Disney World, like Avery just told you, it ain't the happiest place on earth. There's some real weirdness going on at Disney World. And I don't know about Disneyland, but I would imagine it's pretty much the same thing. And don't even get started on the background of Walt Disney.
No, that's a whole nother rabbit hole that you can easily access. Anybody can go and find out what he was all about. But yeah, I mean, there's Satanists, and I think you kind of have to put the disclaimer in there. There's a lot of really good people at Disney World. Okay. There's thousands and thousands of people who go there every year. They have wonderful experiences. I had a great time at Disney World when I was a kid. Thank God they didn't grab me. Right.
We used to go by ourselves, Avery. They give us a couple, ticket books, and off you go. Yeah. Come back at 6 o'clock right here by the Cinderella Castle. Can you imagine?
Today, no. And even back then, I guess it was risky. It's riskier today, but it's sad because it's the same thing with these governmental bodies and the same thing with the FBI. There's a lot of really good people, NASA, who work for these bodies, and it's so compartmentalized that you could work right under a corrupt FBI unit and not know it, and not know that they're running drugs or children or women or whatever, because it's so compartmentalized. So I'm always careful to say that there's more good people than bad. It's just the good people are blinded by ignorance and that desire to not want to admit that we live in the kind of world that we actually do.
And Avery, when was the last time that they arrested a serial killer and his next door neighbor said, I was wondering about that guy. He was really creepy. He was really weird. I never liked him. What do they always say? Nicest guy in the world. Pillar of the community, kept his lawn nice, mowed my lawn. You can be this close to a creature.
Well, and if
you never know it.
If you do research as to what happens to children when they are tortured and abused and subjected to some of these things that they're subjected to, this is what creates the monsters of our world. It's that type of conditioning. That's what creates the sociopath. So in the perpetuation of what's happening to these children, we are creating future sociopaths that will inflict more damage on society. So it's like a cancer. I mean,
absolutely. And when we get into, let's step out of the Satanism realm for a minute, and let's just talk about oppressive, bureaucratic, top-down religion. I mean, you look at the Catholic Church, that's an easy target because of all the horrific things that are going on in the Catholic Church. I was 20 years a Protestant minister, and I'm telling you right now, Avery and everyone else that's in the chat room, and you probably know this, Avery, there's a ticking time bomb in Protestant Christianity right now, because you think the Catholics have an exclusive on abusing children, abusing young children, abusing boys. No way, Jose. The Protestant ministry is full of the same thing, and especially the Protestant missionaries. There is some dark and ugly things going on. Avery, is that really Satanism? And this is your opinion, of course. Is that really Satanism under disguise? Or is it really something about organized, bureaucratic, controlling religion itself that seems to feed these type of people and not only make them, but protect them and perpetuate them?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think a church is a perfect breeding ground for something like that to happen, especially an infiltrated church. So, I grew up Christian, Episcopalian. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of my background. And it was a very intellectual church. I had very intellectual parents, so everything was kind of intellectualized. But when I started later in life, learning a little bit about religion and reading different texts and getting more into the different aspects of spirituality, I realized that the church had been infiltrated, and that a lot of churches are really practicing satanic rituals. Even like the Nicene Creed, when I started reading about the Council of Nicaea, and I remember in church thinking that reciting the Nicene Creed was so creepy, but I never knew why. I just remember sitting there and thinking, like, this is giving me a really creepy feeling, and I would just pretend I was saying the words. Right. But I believe that Satanism has different sects, and these cults have different, they come from different roots, right? And I don't know enough about religion and the antiquity of Satanism and where it really stemmed from, Luciferianism. But I do know that there's people out there, a huge amount of people out there, who do believe that this is their religion. And the other thing that people always say is like, I can't believe it, because who would ever kill a baby to think that, this is going to help them? And it's too preposterous that I would never do that. Well, that's what they are taught. If you grow up in a household where that's what you do on Christmas, or that's what you do on Halloween, that's what you know. And so the average quote unquote normal person who can't wrap their head around it has to realize that this is something that was indoctrinated into these people from birth.
You can make anything normal if you do it often enough.
Right.
And in the benign and folks, and I'm not trying to be funny about this at all, but there's a reason why it's called the missionary position. There really is. And Avery, you came from the Episcopalian realm. Let me tell you what happens in the big super Pentecostal super churches, the charismatic super churches. There's a guy or a gal there that runs what's called the bus ministry. And you usually have, if it's a big church, 10 to 20, maybe 30, 40 buses. And what they do is they go all week long. They take their nice buses down into usually underprivileged areas, areas where there's a lot of kids hanging out. And they will recruit a bunch of kids. Every Sunday, we're going to come get you, and you're going to go to the church, and we're going to have cookies and cake, and we're going to tell you about Jesus. So you've got, if you think about it, it's the perfect breeding ground. You've got bus loads and bus loads and bus loads of kids, and the parents are just, bye, see you in 4 hours.
Yep.
What happens when little Johnny gets on the church bus to go downtown to First Assembly? What happens to little Susie when she gets on the bus to go downtown to, the huge Baptist church? They're gone for 4 hours.
Yep.
No mom,
Very true.
No dad, nothing but, brother Bill and sister Sadie to watch them, take care of them, and do who knows what to them. Vacation Bible school, somebody's talking about. We've really got to start thinking through the things that we're allowing our children to do. And Avery, that's every single big church in the country. That's the way it works.
Yeah. Yeah. I think most of them have been infiltrated at this point. From what I understand, and most people have no clue. People could be worshiping Satan and not even realizing it, because it's just been seeded into their church, and the pastors don't know any better.
Right.
It's just pervasive. And I know the leap is really hard for people to take. And I know that this is, a lot of people think the information is just preposterous. And I take the
what do you say to those people that are sitting there saying these people are crazy? It's preposterous.
I just look at people like that and I say, look at the statistics in your own town. Look at the statistics around you. Go talk to law enforcement about it. If you really care. If you don't, then I don't want to talk to you anyway. But if you really care and you're just a skeptic, well, your skepticism is costing the lives of children. That's how I look at it. Your inability to accept the ugly truth is aiding in the murder and torture of children and rape of children. So we're all culpable as far as I'm concerned. And once you learn about, even if you have a tiny little pinprick of learning, it's your responsibility to do something about it, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing about this. This is not my background. I'm an English major. I majored in English literature. I was a social worker when I graduated college. So I did get some interaction with children, but this isn't my field of study. This is just a pervasive problem in society that has to stop. And some people have to stand up. And there are some journalists I would like to talk about a little bit.
Sure, go ahead.
People are interested in doing some research. So Ben Swan was on the Fox network. He was the one who broke the Pizzagate story in any real type of way on the mainstream media. some people will remember Megyn Kelly and her pathetic interview of James Alefantis. I mean, if you look that up, it's just the worst piece of pseudo journalism I've ever seen in my life. I won't go there.
Megyn Kelly and pseudo journalism kind of are redundant.
Exactly. Thank you. But Liz Crokin is also very vocal about this. She's a very pro-Trump supporter, so I think she turns a lot of people off that way. But she's very vocal about the pedophilia problem, and she has done more research than anyone that I have seen who's on the internet right now. David Seaman from Fulcrum News, he was also a journalist, Huffington Post, who broke this story. And these are all these journalists have basically not been able to practice their craft after they broke this story. Liz Crokin was, I think, attacked. She was, death threats, same thing with David Seaman. But he came out with the Pizzagate thing, and he's still talking about it on his YouTube channel and at Fulcrum News. And SGT Report on YouTube, I think his name is Sean, the guy that runs that, but he does a lot on this and he has a lot of research. So there's some really good people out there who are trying to push this forward. And, it's people like that and people who are watching programs like this who can just really, start to get into it and learn about it and share it. That's what's going to stop it.
And you talk a lot about Planet X and things like that on your channel, and we won't probably get into this too deeply, but you're convinced that there's also an off-world element to this as well?
I think that the alien presence that has been suppressed from most of humanity, the knowledge of it, which is part of the disclosure movement, which I think is also a fascinating thing that's happening right now. But I do believe that they have something to do with it. Now, I don't know the level of it. I can only research people who are whistleblowers in that arena. And I listened to David Wilcock and Corey Good. And there's a couple other people coming forward who are saying, yes, I've met alien beings, blah, 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 blah. That's been going on for centuries, since the 20s now, I think. But I think that, that's probably part of it. And that's just a stretch that I'd say 90% of the people on the planet can't do right now.
Gotcha.
I think they'd have a heart attack.
Dan is asking you, what do you think about the concept of archons?
Well, I believe in archonic energy. I think we can conjure it. I think that, thought forms can turn into archons. I don't feel intuitively that they have anything to do with the actual trafficking, pedophilia, murder, and rape of children. Certainly there's, I'm sure, some ethereal stuff going on with them, but I don't know, but my gut is telling me that they aren't the problem.
That's interesting. So, we've done a good job talking about the problem and identifying the problem, and hopefully some people that have just been, I don't want to hear it, will actually sit up and take notice. What are some steps that we can do, Avery? Some positive things or constructive things is perhaps a better word. What can we do to combat this menace in our societies?
I think a good step is just being aware and promoting information. So if you've learned these things to be true, it's your responsibility to share the information with your family, with your friends, despite ridicule, despite I don't want to see it. That can really help. Talking to your local authorities can help. Starting to get an idea of what's going on in your own community. Like when I started researching what was happening here in Brevard County, I was floored. I had no idea this was happening. So education is empowerment, and it kind of makes the scary monster go away to a degree, because if you learn the facts about it, then, the power goes away. And the more people who talk about it, it's going to take the power from the people who are perpetuating this.
Gotcha.
And I really think we have to practice forgiveness and understanding, as much as that doesn't seem conceivable for people who are doing this to children. You have to remember that this is a multi-generational sickness. It does not excuse them. It doesn't give them a free pass. I think anyone who harms children or animals or anybody is a sick person that there needs to be retribution. But us being angry and indignant and, just wanting to kill all these people isn't going to help either. So we have to move forward in a reverent way and in an educated way and in a way where we're looking at our individual communities and changing it there at that level.
Now, are there typically local organizations that people can reach out to and become involved with if they feel so motivated?
Every community has some type of child protection service. So you can start there. There's the National Center for Missing Children, and I believe that they have branches in all areas of the country. You can also look up Thorn, which is THORN. It's a software company that was started to help law enforcement track down these perpetrators. So there's a lot of people who are involved in this movement of bringing it to the light, but every municipality has something. Now you have to understand that there are corrupt people in all of those entities, which is part of the problem, but you could very well start there.
Excellent. Now let's talk about a little bit more practical. Let's talk about protecting your children, protecting yourself, and if you can, move a little bit into LOIS and what that is and what that does. And are there any applications for LOIS as far as children would go?
Absolutely, there are. So the basic premise of LOIS, it's a check-in system. So as the example of me showing a house.
Is it an acronym?
No, well, we kind of said it stood for Leaders on Individual Safety. Mm-hmm. So, but it's my middle name, which is why and I wanted to personalize the software because that was kind of what was happening around the time it was being designed, but it acts as a dead man switch. So you log in, it will call you or text you when you're on this appointment that you've logged in prior. If you don't answer and dismiss the alert, it will contact the police or your spouse or your best friend or whatever you set it up to do.
So if I go to your house and pick you up for a date and you've got LOIS set up and 3-4 hours go by and you haven't checked in, it's contacting somebody to find out where you are. And I'm sure you've probably left information about where you're going to be and who you're going to be with.
Who you're meeting, any information about them ahead of time is put into the system. And then it actually calls you. You don't have to, the whole point of this was you don't have to do anything, because if someone takes your phone or you're nervous or you call 911, which is only 62% accurate because it's an antiquated system, then, that's an action that you have to take. This calls you or texts you. So if you're on a date, you can be very discreet. If the person's not a creep, you can dismiss it or even snooze it if you haven't decided if they're a creep or not yet. Or
if it's a really bad day, you can use it to say, oh, darn, gotta go.
My friend is sick. I gotta, yeah, exactly. that could help too. But that's the basic premise of it. And then there is the additional part where we have a geolocation and geofencing feature. So for a child, for instance, you put it on their phone, and if they leave a certain parameter, the parent is triggered. So if the child is taken, say beyond 1/4 mile of the home, the parents automatically get dinged. And this is on the LOIS app, which is launching in about a month.
Great.
So we do have a geo-tracking feature, and you can turn the geo-tracking feature on wherever you go. And if something were to happen to you within that parameter, then, it will call the police, and the police will get your real time where you are, based on that geo-tracking feature.
And that can make all the difference in the world, I would imagine. Knowing that someone disappeared in Clearwater is a lot different than knowing that they disappeared on the corner of Fort Harrison and Myrtle in Clearwater.
Absolutely. And the first moments of any type of abduction or crime are the most important. It's instrumental that the police know that you're missing real time. Had something happen to me in that home, for instance, nobody knew where I was. Nobody knew when I was due back. Who knows when my family would have noticed that I wasn't answering their calls. This is real time. The minute something happens and you don't answer that call, they're going to know that you're in trouble.
Interesting. And it's coming out when, you say?
Well, right now you can actually try the web app version, and it does fit on your phone. It is, it's interactive, but the app version will be out in about a month. So if you want to go to safelois.com, you can try it for 14 days, the actual web version, and then the one that you can download from Android or the iPhone store, that'll be available hopefully in about 30 days.
Excellent. Have you given any thoughts to making one that's actually directed just for children?
We have, in terms of branding, so there's these different verticals, the elderly market, we've got the dating, we've got the millennials, we got
that's a great idea.
Children and family. Yes, people who have Alzheimer's or dementia. So there's really unlimited applications for it. And we have different marketing campaigns that will target all of those different markets.
Fascinating, fascinating. So if we can just close with this, from your interest, from your experience and all the people you've talked with, do you have maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 practical little guidelines that you can use to keep yourself safe and to keep your children safe?
I think the best one is situational awareness. So knowing that we live in a potentially unsafe world, telling people where you're going, what you're doing, who you're going to be with, knowing where your kids are, knowing who the people are, who are taking care of your children. I think the breakdown of the family has been a real issue because, screens are raising children in a lot of instances, and they're on their computer and their phones, and they're not interacting as families. They're not building those bonds. So the communication's not happening. So I would say communicate, let your kids know, the stuff that everybody tells their kids: don't talk to strangers, don't get into cars, but take it a level beyond that, and trust that children can handle information. Don't try to shield them from the world. Let them know what is out there and what is happening. That's going to protect them even more, being aware. And, networking with other parents, just being vigilant about, this is your child. This is a precious commodity, and there are people who will prey on your child if given the opportunity.
Absolutely. I'm a martial artist, and I was doing this a while back about teaching people to be aware in society, to realize that we are in a predatory environment, to realize that in many cases we are in a battle zone, and just to do simple things, notice things, look around. I probably need to get back to that because it's so easy for us to assume, oh, everything's okay, this is my neighborhood, but we really do need to be diligent. We really do need to be aware, and it might not be a bad idea, now that I know it was based on a true story, to go back and watch Taken again to give us an idea of what's really going on out there.
Well, a good example of how to keep your kids safe in that scenario is they found this girl online. So
right.
Here she is, and maybe she was younger than Fit. Maybe she was like 13 or something. She thought she was talking to another 13-year-old boy. And they monitored her and tracked her for weeks before they knew when her parents were going to be gone. They knew her patterns because she was telling this boy that she was chatting with all this information. So monitoring what your kids are doing online, who's talking to them, who are they interacting with?
And these people aren't in a hurry, are they, Avery? It's a large, vast network. Different kids are in different portions of the funnel, if you will, and they work it like a business. Boom, 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 boom. So make sure that you're not in that funnel.
And I think the $1 trillion figure, I think that included sex trafficking, drug running, arms, weapons, the whole gamut, the whole black market. But that's still staggering.
This just popped into my head, and I don't know why. This is really weird. You've got these places. It used to be Craigslist. Now there's new places where, regular guys, guys that are, supposedly nice guys, go on there and, participate in, quote unquote, harmless prostitution. Is that one of these entry points and one of the problems?
Well, there's no such thing as harmless prostitution, first of all.
I agree.
And it harms both parties. But yeah, I mean, a lot of these girls, for example, who were taken maybe when they were kids and raped and abused and trafficked, that's what they know. That's how you make your money. That's how you get affection. That's how you get love. That's what they know. So when you're going to a strip club as a guy, or when you're having a prostitute, this is probably someone who's been abused their whole life. And it's, again, part of the problem. The male that thinks that that's okay has also been brainwashed into thinking that's okay. And they're also part of the problem.
So it's not a victimless crime by any standard.
No, everybody is hurt by that. Everybody's hurt by that. Everybody's hurt by the immorality that's been happening, and the breakdown of that and the family. And it's not what our Creator intended for us to be doing. I don't believe.
I agree 100%. Avery, tell us once again how we can get in touch with you personally, the Lois Show, and how we can find out more about the Lois software.
So if you want to check out the software, go to safelois.com.
And that's SAFE, right?
Yep, safelois.com. You can go to on YouTube, The Lois Show, and you can get a hold of me on there, send me a message. I think my email's on there, but certainly you can send me a message. And
Twitter, you're at Safe Lois, right?
Twitter is at Safe Lois, correct.
Right. All right, I put all it in on the chat here, folks, so you can access all of that. What's
Great.
coming up next for you, Avery? Any new stuff?
Oh, well, working on the launch, and I'm still working on the channel, and it's kind of my little pet project right now, but I have a little more time to work on some other things. So I've got some stuff coming up in the future that I think will be exciting. I just am one of those people who has a quest for knowledge. And excellent. I'm just sharing the information, the small little bit of information I've been able to glean from this world. I'm just sharing with people.
Excellent. Now, if people are interested in Space Coast real estate, are you still involved in that?
I actually work for Sotheby's right now. Okay. I work on a barrier island, and they can also get a hold of me through the Lois channel if they want to explore any of those avenues. But yeah, I am doing both.
Excellent. Well, it was a pleasure to have you, Avery. I only called you Lois once. I'm going to call that a victory.
Thanks, Jeffrey. I really appreciate it. This was fun.
And maybe we'll have you back again some other time. We'll talk about some of the more esoteric, spiritual, faith-based weirdness that you display on the Lois Show as well.
That would be great. I would love that.
All right. Excellent. Folks, I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower. This is Avery from the Lois Show. We thank you for being with us. Avery, sit there, please, for 1 second. I'll say goodbye to you. We salute all of you for being here with us, and I'll see you again real soon.